women have influenced the world as we know it. Math, science, philosophy, journalism, government systems, farming, you name it. We just haven't always been recognized that way. We're going to do a little bit of a history, science lesson today because I think it's so important to understand where we've come from in order to continue to see the path that we're walking on and where we want to go next. Hi, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of the B is For podcast. I'm your host, Bria Villa, and today the B is for bring, because women bring life into this world. We bring light into this world. We bring joy into this world. We bring value to this world that no one else can bring. And therefore, we have to bring ourselves to ourselves. We have to bring ourselves to having the awareness of that value. And so today I want to bring you along in my journey and recognition of the value of a woman, the value of myself. And hopefully in this journey, I bring you to recognize the value and worth that you carry too. This episode is absolutely directed towards women. If you are a male listener, I appreciate you for being here and supporting me. As you know, this podcast is initially created for women, but I've actually gained a pretty strong male following, and many of which have good feedback, even though the message isn't always directed towards them. And so if you are a man listening to today's episode, I actually think it will be immensely valuable to you. So I know you heard women and bringing ourselves back to ourselves, but I'm actually going to take us through a little history lesson and then provide some main themes towards the end that kind of bring this whole conversation together. And I think it's equally as valuable for a man to hear, but of course, predominantly targeted towards my women. So, my women listening, this message is strongly with you in mind, because when I look at myself and understand the aura, the essence, the beauty of being a woman, I can't help but think about the women who have helped me become who I am. The women who came before me, the women who are alongside of me, the women that we will help influence in the future, and everyone in between. And so this message initially was my own reflections about womanhood, but really has had you in mind throughout it, or throughout the creation of this message. So I want to start with sharing a little bit about my journey. As many of us have, grew up correlating my worth and the value that I bring to this world in association with men, in association with what I do for others, in association with love, romantic love, and for that to be yearned for. I grew up thinking that marriage and having kids is the ultimate achievement as a woman. I grew up societally being taught that my value has to be not just defined by men, but approved by men. That I have to move through life being palatable to a man in order to eventually be chosen by a man. I'm not saying this was my entire perspective, but I am saying that society absolutely conditioned us to have that be a part of, if not a major aspect in framing our perspective. And so it wasn't until recently, it wasn't until the past few years that I've really done deep work on myself. And I've shared this with you all plenty of times, because that's really where this podcast actually stemmed from, is the work on myself, that I started to realize how much value a woman has and how intensely that value has been dimmed, because the recognition of it will lead to a pretty large imbalance of power. I started to recognize the things that I am capable of, the things in society that very much so rely on women. And I started to realize the influence that I can have, not only on my immediate circle and the people around me, my community, society as we know it, just by bringing other women into the fold and also sharing what I know to be true about myself. I want to be very clear. This conversation is for everyone. Being pro-woman does not mean being anti-men. Okay, men are invited to this conversation. I hope men hear this message. And I hope men see the value that we carry, but this isn't my intention to show them. My intention is for us to recognize it in ourselves in the way that I'm recognizing it in myself. And then inevitably moving with that worth, with that value in mind. Because I would argue that many women, and there's a swing right now, which I'm going to get into, but many women do not move with the knowing, with the acknowledgement of their own power. And today we're going to change that a bit. Today I want to invite you to lean into that knowing, but I have to give you some context first. There's a few moments in my life recently that have been aha moments for me. They have highlighted this realization for me, one of which was a date that I went on recently. And this man is a man of status. This man is a man that, quite frankly, has a lot of women pretty much throwing themselves at him. And we're having a conversation at dinner. We're talking about a woman's worth and my standards and how I started to put certain boundaries in place and all the things. And he looks at me and he was like, "It's so refreshing to hear you know your worth." And in the back of my mind, I'm like, as a man, who are you to judge whether or not a woman is knowing of her worth? But in the same sense, I was like, okay, let me dig in. And he was like, "You'd be surprised how often I meet women who don't understand the power that they have." And I was like, okay, tell me more. And he was like, "Men revolve around women. Everything that we do is for a woman. When we get money, when we work hard, when we get fit, all these things is really because we want women. You all hold all the power." And he literally told me, looking at me, and he's like, "You in this situation hold all the power." And I was like, I know. And I appreciate that you acknowledge that. I appreciate that you understand that. And I appreciate that you move with intention because you know that. Same date went great. It was very conversational and he respected my boundaries and there was no funny business. We didn't even kiss. But it's because we had this deep conversation about the value that women have. And the conversation, whether it happened or not, the truth still remained and I knew it. I didn't need his validation to know this. I share that to say that, one, from a man's perspective, I think that that piece of information is so important to hear as women, especially give or take from a man with status who doesn't have to work very hard to get women. But two, it shows that there is a deep lying, and some men may recognize it, some men may not, but deep, deep down, we know what a driver is for them. But I'm not saying this to say that we should understand our worth for men. We should just understand our worth, period. When you really think about it, we are the life force. We, women, bring life into this world. We literally create life. We carry and build and mold life within us and connect the spiritual realm to the physical realm through our bodies. We are so tapped in. Our intuition is insanely strong because we have this connection. I would argue, I mean, really, if you think about it, this is a funny example, but I was having this conversation recently. I was like, how many psychics, quote unquote, do you know that are men? Not very many. Like, you see this idea of a psychic, and it's a woman. Why? Because women have this deep intuition because we are connected to source because we create life. And I'm not saying men aren't connected. This isn't a conversation to compare women to men the entire time. This is a conversation strictly about women in our own right, and also maybe the historical context or the societal context in which men are connected to our existence, right? But women are so powerful because life stops and starts with us. And when you think about it, at least for me, I reflect on the times that I was struggling, that I needed support, and time and time and time again, that support came from a community of women. One woman, if not multiple women, who were there for me, who had my back, who uplifted me, who cared for me, because that is just in the nature of what we do at our core, deep down. And that's powerful. The community that women build in order to support one another is powerful. I want us to keep expanding on that. That being said, I want to take us down memory lane. And by memory lane, I'm talking thousands of years ago. We're going to do a little bit of a history science lesson today because I think it's so important to understand where we've come from in order to continue to see the path that we're walking on and where we want to go next. And it's important to understand this about ourselves. And honestly, these are facts that I didn't know until recently. And I would be so remiss not to share because it is incredible to understand the power and the influence that we've had on society for as long as human civilization has existed. I wrote a ton of notes preparing for this conversation because there's no way that I could store this all in my brain. And so I have like 3 pages. Wait, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. 3 pages of notes in my notebook that I'm going to read from and share because this information, like I said, is so valuable. For the context of history, humans have been around for 300,000 years. The first human fossil, Homo sapien fossil, was found 300,000 years ago. Civilization, communal, cultural connectivity is probably like 50 to 100,000 years ago, roughly. So for thousands of years, civilizations operated as hunter-gatherers. The men were the hunters. They physically were built to go and hunt. Women were the gatherers. Women would take what was brought back and find ways to take care of their tribe, their community through what was received, meaning they would figure out how to ration food. They would figure out how to distribute effectively without running out of food. They figured out how to create livable circumstances, shelter, etc., to ensure the survival of themselves and the community around them. And that was the hunter-gatherer phase, right? And then about 10 to 12,000 years ago, there was that shift, or there was a shift from hunter-gatherer to agricultural life. Thousands of years of women learning what to do with the resources that were brought, how to effectively utilize them to take care of their community, so much so that it allowed for an agricultural life shift, meaning people could plant roots and stay and less hunting and rely more on sustainable food systems because women gained knowledge of seasons, they gained knowledge of soil, they gained knowledge on plant cycles, and they gained knowledge on regrowth. And so that knowledge was tied to the most powerful thing at that time, which was food, because food was quite literally the mechanism of life or death. It was the mechanism of survival. And women had the knowledge of how to grow it, how to sow it, how to take care of it, how seasons operated, when they should grow it, when they shouldn't, when certain things could grow versus other things couldn't. And that turned into women managing food storage. That turned into women processing grains and ultimately controlled economic domestic production. And so the knowledge that women had of plants allowed for us to start to create communities that were seated in one location and that could thrive off of consistent food sources instead of whatever was hunted that day, right? Like there was sustainability created by the knowledge that women had of food and how it worked, which is so cool to me. Incredible that women for thousands of years, thousands, did that. But it didn't stop there because plant knowledge ended up leading to herbal remedies. Women's knowledge of plants then allowed for them to use plants as medicine. Women became midwives. Women became herbalists. Women were keepers of generational knowledge. And so when you look at it like that, because women had the knowledge of plants and utilize that knowledge to help heal other people, help take care of other people, women were quite literally the first doctors. For those thousands of years, we operated, or civilizations operated, as a matrilineal system, meaning knowledge, goods, property. Obviously, there weren't deeds and purchasing of land back then, but you understand my point. All of that was passed through women. So there was a point in time where, because women were the source of life and the source of generational knowledge, information, goods, land, settlements were actually passed through women. And then eventually, when property mattered more, the control over women increased because things were being passed through women, and property and establishment and the owning of resources started to matter more, started to play into power dynamics and societal shifts. Then people, men, were power grabbing, and therefore that's really when the control over women increased. In ancient civilizations, there are stories, there are artifacts, and please feel free to look this up, where women were viewed as goddesses, where women were viewed as beings to be worshipped. And then eventually, out of survival tactics and the continuation of evolution, there was a realization of the power dynamic, and that's where control and suppression really started to come into play. But remember, women operated this way for centuries, thousands, honey, thousands of years. Okay, that is so dope to think about. But then there were things like witch hunts. Witch hunts occurred between the 15th and the 18th century, and women were being targeted and were being killed for doing what they've done for centuries just because what they were doing was a threat to power. Over 40,000 women, and obviously records back then are not as good, it was likely more, were killed for doing what they've naturally done, for healing medicinally, for being midwives, for speaking up against the power grab that they were experiencing. Women were demonized. Even the term witch is just a negative title that were given to women in order for society to view them and their power, us and our power, as a threat. Another cool history lesson. So, philosophy is super interesting to me. I've studied different ancient philosophers, and in further research that I did, came to find out that the philosophers that you know very well, like Socrates, like Pericles, who were ancient Greek philosophers that shaped mathematics and astronomy and the sciences we know today were actually influenced, shocker, by women. In history, there's the speaking of a woman by the name of Aspasia. She was known to be Pericles' mistress during the height of Athens' golden age, when the reality was she was his intellectual equal, if not somewhat his teacher. She was a rhetorician and a philosopher in her own right. She actually ran a salon in Athens that attracted the most brilliant minds, such as Socrates. She taught rhetoric, and she also influenced the oratory style of Pericles and Socrates. Talk about the typical saying of behind every great man is an even greater woman. Yeah, that was Aspasia. Diotima actually taught Socrates and Plato. And then there was Hypatia, who was a mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher from Alexandria, Egypt. She's often considered the first recorded female mathematician in history. Mind you, this was in 355 CE, 355 to 415 CE. She taught philosophy and science at the Neoplatonist school in Alexandria. She was viewed as one of the early founders of algebra. And you've literally never heard of her. I hadn't heard of her until I went down a rabbit hole and found out about her. She literally influenced math and science the way we know it to be today. And she was brutally murdered, literally ripped apart by her limbs by a mob of Christian men because she was a threat to power. And there are so many more women like these women. But I highlight these women specifically because they are at the beginning of free thinking. They're at the beginning of the intellectualization of the world as we know it. They taught the philosophers that we know about, that we hear about, that we use their methodologies and their theories to this day. And yet we've never heard of them. And so what that tells me is that women are not incapable of doing these things. Women just have historically not been recognized for doing these things. And so I want to remind you that any societal imprint that you have on your brain of what you can do or what you can't do or what's historically done by men versus what's done by women, I promise you there's women behind a lot of the things that you think are not possible. You just haven't realized it yet because their stories haven't been told. It doesn't mean that they weren't there doing it. All right, so let's fast forward. I live in the United States. I know that I have global listeners, so this may pertain more to the environment that I'm in now, but women did not have the right to vote in the United States until 1920. They did not have the ability to have independent banking until 1974. Women have influenced the world as we know it. Math, science, philosophy, journalism, government systems, farming, you name it. We just haven't always been recognized that way. The feminine is powerful. And we don't even need to solely talk about the feminine in the stance of humans. Let's talk about it in the stance of nature. For example, female leadership is not unnatural. It's actually very natural in nature, in species outside of the human species. Actually, women leadership or female leadership is oftentimes found when long-term survival is necessary or when it really matters. For example, whales, toothed whales, are all matriarchal. So orcas, for example, the eldest female is the one that leads the pack. They remember, they carry the knowledge and then pass it to their youth, which, by the way, their children remain with them. Sons, daughters, their babies stay and remain with them until they pass on, and then they share information with their youth on how to feed, on where to go during certain seasons, on how to hunt. Like, they lead their packs. Same thing with elephants. Elephants are matriarchal systems. The eldest female elephant also leads the pack, remembers where the watering holes are, remembers the paths that they need to take during different seasons to get to sustainable food sources, and consistently repeat that pattern. But it's not just in whales and elephants, it's literally in ants, in bees, in hyenas, in monkeys. Women are literally designed to lead the generations after us. Most animals reproduce until near death, or they don't live life much longer than when they give birth, except for humans, elephants, orcas. We're all menopausal. So not only is the life that we bring so valuable, because it is literally the continuation of generations after us, but then we live an extended lifetime not being able to reproduce, because that energy, scientifically, we've evolved to use that energy to lead the generations below us, to help take care of the grandchildren, to help guide them, to help give them information that ultimately are survival tactics for the future. We are designed, we are wired to lead. You have to ask yourself why. If reproduction is one of the most powerful things that we can do as women, why do we live so much longer after we're done reproducing? Because the knowledge transfer to generations is equally as valuable. We are meant to carry that knowledge, and we're meant to share it with the generations below us in order for them to survive, in order for them to thrive, in order for them and our species to keep moving forward. We are built to do that. That is freaking incredible. Do you know how powerful that is? Like, we are capable, beyond capable, of leading. It's in all of us as women. And it is such a beautiful thing and worth more than what anybody can put a number on. And actually, fun scientific fact here, every single human body begins female. At around 6 to 7 weeks, if XY chromosomes are present, then the SRY triggers testicular development. But without that signal, development continues along the default ovarian pathway. So before we were differentiated, we were the same. And the body of a woman, the female, is actually the template, is actually the blueprint. And we all started here. We all started female. We are literally the creators of life. We are the beginning. And we have to recognize, and I've recognized in my own journey, the power of that. We are designed incredibly, and we don't give ourselves or the women around us enough credit for it. And so we have this history that I shared. We have this science that I've shared. And if that isn't compelling enough, then please do your own research. But I want to talk about present day and how this has shifted the way that I think now, and honestly, what I'm seeing in society now. There is a rise of women empowerment. We are the most empowered we have ever been historically in thousands of years. That is not something to be taken lightly. Women are increasingly starting businesses across the world at rapid rates. Women are now more educated than men, statistically. And statistically, we are the most financially independent we've ever been. That is powerful. But women's centrality is not modern rebellion. It's stepping into our designed roles. It's literally ancient structure. And it's time that we start recognizing our worth. We're witnessing a shift in real time of women reclaiming autonomy at scale. And so society has taught us so many things about who we are, who we're expected to be, in what ways we're actually valuable, and who decides our value. And I'm here to tell you, we have to decentralize that mindset. We have to decentralize men while still loving them, while still partnering with them, while still creating community with them. But it should never be at the cost of devaluing ourselves in order for our value to be defined by them. And so, taking men out of the equation, something that I have realized is how capable I am, how much power I hold, the strength that I have, and how beautiful my role in society is, how beautiful my value is, how worthy I am. There are generations upon generations of women who have dreamt of the life I am living now, who have died for the life that I am living now. We are in a unique position where we have the power of choice. Not entirely, there are still rights that we are fighting for. And depending on where you are in the world, it may be different, but your value remains the same. There were times where women did not have the ability to choose their partner long term. They were either in arranged marriages, or they had to pick based off stability, or they had to pick based off financial situation because they couldn't even have their own bank account. And we have the luxury and the ability to choose what's right for us because it's actually right for us. And I had this thought recently for a long time, y'all, for a long time. All I wanted was to be married. All I wanted was a partner. All I wanted was to find a true romantic love and connection because I felt like that was the end goal. Like, I'll be happy when I find a man. And I felt like that was just societal conditioning while also recognizing that I do want a partner. But I don't want a partner for the sake of having a partner. I want a partner who is going to be equally invested in our partnership for the remainder of life. Otherwise, I do not want one. And I am okay with that. For a while, I was like, oh, how valuable am I as a woman if I go the rest of my life alone or not being a mom? And the reality is I'm very valuable. I'm very valuable. I'm so valuable because I hold the power. Me procreating is a very important choice. And who I choose to do that with, they must be exceptional. Otherwise, why would I do it? Women before me did not have the ability, did not have the luxury of even having this thought process, let alone choosing it. We are so incredible, and society at times has pitted us against each other, has told us that the women standing beside us who are meant to be a community for us, who are meant to be people we lean on, who are meant to create spaces that invoke safety, are our enemies. Because of what? I'll let you answer that. But when we recognize our worth, when we recognize the capability that we have, when we recognize the value that we have, and when we start moving like we have that value, we will see a major shift in how this world and society operates. Community amongst women is not just a nice to have, it is a means for survival and has been for centuries. Don't forget that the women standing next to you are women worth uplifting because they've gone through the same troubles, the same barriers, the same degradation, the same oppression that you have, if not more, or maybe less, but they've gone through it. Don't forget that shared experience. Don't forget that you get to choose when, where, and how life comes into this world. Don't forget that. I was journaling recently and it really hit me how incredible of a life that I am living and how fortunate I am to be in the situation that I am. I was thinking about how many times I've packed a suitcase, left the country on my own dime, on my own time, on my own accord, without having to check for anybody. And it really made me think that there are generations of women who came before me, who got me to the position that I am in now, who would have killed to be in my spot, who could have never imagined that life for themselves, but they pushed forward because they hoped that somewhere in their lineage, this life would happen. That is beautiful. And it is not something that I take for granted. And it's something that I want to leverage to create for the women who come after me, for the women that I'm talking to right now, and for the men who are listening who have very incredible, powerful women in their lives. So, ladies, this is a reminder to myself and also a message for you that everything that you seek is already within you. You are so capable. You are so strong. You are so influential. You are so enlightened. You are so connected. You are so intuitive. You are so life bringing. Do not lose sight of that. Remind yourself of it and surround yourself with people who remind you of it as well. Continue to be a light to the women around you, build community, choose to hold the men in your life to a standard of accountability and to a standard of awareness of your worth. Because who is going to value you if you don't value you? And on the days that you forget how powerful and valuable you are, remember the centuries of women who came before you, who did so much, who accomplished so much with far less than what we have and still got us here today. You are made of that same strength. You are made of that same divinity. You are made of that same softness. Use it, acknowledge it, and then use it. That is a message to me. That is a message to you. That is a message. If you're a man listening to this and you have a daughter, I hope that you remind her every day of how powerful she really is. Because you and I both know she is. And for the ladies that are listening to this, you and I both know that you are. You are everything that you think you are and then some. Women are incredible. Incredible. Do not forget that for a second. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all the thing. English. It's been a long one. Like, comment, subscribe, all the things, and I will see you in a couple weeks. Bye.